Video games, like books or movies, have people who are avid users who have made it central to their lives. A quote from the Rolling Stones, December 7th, 1972, said, and I quote, "As video arcades and home video consoles gained in popularity, youth culture quickly adapted to this type of media, engaging in competitions to gain high scores and spending hours at the arcade or with a home console." In the 1980s, an increasingly large number of kids were spending time on consoles playing games, and more importantly, more and more were increasingly identifying with the characters and products associated with the games. Morning cartoons were made out of the Pac-Man and Super Mario Bros. Games, and a plethora of non-game merch was sold with the video game logos and characters. The public recognition of these characters made them into cultural icons. And a poll taken in 2007 found that more Canadians surveyed could identify a photo of Mario from Super Mario Bros. Than a photo of their current Canadian Prime Minister. Video games have given people who are smart and adept at technology, but just lacking the skills to be popular, a place where they can have a sense of camaraderie. And the subculture has become more and more accepted by the mainstream, and as a result it has become cooler. But mainstream culture has also become geekier. The mainstreaming of video games has led to the acceptance of fantasy or virtual worlds, which is evident in the popularity of film book series like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Comic book characters have become the reason and drive for blockbuster movies like Spider-Man and The Dark Knight, which have also become hit games. The idea of a fantasy or virtual world appeals to greater numbers of people. Virtual worlds like those in Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty series, and online games such as World of Warcraft have expanded the ideal of virtual worlds so that there are not ways of escaping the real world, but new ways to interact with others within it. At this point, everyone has heard of games that have taken headlines across the world in recent times, like Fortnite and Call of Duty. That reason is because gaming just isn't in the living room anymore. It's everywhere, on your phone, computer, and even on cable television. And now competitive games have developed into esports, where people compete for millions of dollars for themselves, team, or charity of choice. There's also famous streamers who live stream their games to people on platforms like YouTube or Twitch, and make anywhere from thousands to millions of dollars a month based on donations, sponsors, and brand deals. The most famous and successful and well-known streamer, who has just recently hosted an event with millions at Times Square, and also streamed with Drake, known as Ninja. Not to mention the millions of dollars that have been raised by charity streams for a number of charities and causes. This all couldn't be done without games and the gamers to support them.
One of the biggest debates out there is whether esports are a sport.
The action's on, it's going to be down to the last possible second.
How the hell is he still alive?
When most people think about sports, they're thinking about large muscle movements, shooting a basketball or dunking a basketball or tackling somebody in football. Those are all activities that involve large muscle groups. Some people might not think that esports is a sport because it primarily involves fine motor movements. However, when you're thinking about archery and release of that bow, or you're thinking about stationary target shooting and the pull of the trigger, both of those activities are Olympic sports. Very similar movements are used in esports.
Nowadays, more than ever, it takes an athlete to compete in esport. We use the motor cortex in the same way in traditional sport and in esport. You have a visual stimuli. It's processed by the brain as a pattern that you have to learn through hours and hours of rigorous training. And then you have an automatic reflex based on what you understand from that. And you have to just instantly do it as fast as possible, which is a motor movement. The only way to code these kinds of neural changes is through volume and intensity. You have to train more and you have to train harder. There's no other way around it.
The International is the big one. If you take TI, you become immortal.
When you're watching these players play Dota 2 for millions of dollars at the International, think about how much skill is involved for them to compete at this elite level.
YouTube launched a new video network yesterday where you can watch other people play video games. For real, the whole network. It's called the We Should All Be Very Ashamed of Ourselves for Failing as Parents channel. Actually, it's called YouTube Gaming, and I don't get that. To me, you know, watching another person play video games is like going to a restaurant and having someone eat your food for you. Just if you like them, play them.
That was Jimmy Kimmel on the launch of YouTube Gaming in August of 2015. But even before the PC age, video games were making waves in mainstream media, although it was largely in the context of novelty. In 1985, Billy Mitchell was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the record holder for high scores on 6 arcade games, including Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. In the early 80s, Starcade aired for 133 episodes, where competitors face off head-to-head in arcade games. Other similar concepts would crop up, including Video and Arcade Top 10 in Canada, Game Master in the UK, and Amazing in Australia.
Welcome back. This is Amazing Us. Take your control pads, please. On the Moo Moo Farm track. Mario Karts, let's go race them.
But none of these were yet what we would consider esports. That came later. In 1997, Dennis Thresh Fong won ID Software CEO John Carmack's Ferrari 328 at the Red Annihilation Quake tournament. The event, which was hosted at E3, is widely considered as the first ever esports tournament, and Thresh himself is often called the first professional gamer. Over the next decade or so, television and esports would continue to brush shoulders, but it only really caught on in Korea. By the year 2000, there were 2 24-hour channels for televised esports and other gaming content. In 2006, MLG took a shot at TV, broadcasting their MLG 2006 Pro Circuit featuring Halo on the USA Network.
There's nowhere better to be than at MLG. The best players in the world are here to see how they stack up.
But it didn't catch on. But in 2011, when Justin TV launched a spin-off platform called Twitch TV, specifically for their gaming section, everything changed. Twitch would become the most popular streaming platform on the planet, and esports viewership numbers would explode. The League World Championships went from 1.7 million viewers in 2011 to 8.2 million in 2012. Then 32 million in 2013. If Quake, StarCraft, and Street Fighter were the one-on-one pioneers of the esports world, it was Halo, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and Dota that finally brought it to its full potential.
Back in February, a bunch of us went down to the Super Bowl to watch the Seahawks throw. And arguably, you know, Super Bowl is one of the biggest sporting events in the world. So you've got all these parties, all this drinking, all these events. What were we doing? We were back at the hotel, clustered around EJ's laptop, watching the DAC group stage.
These games were not only viewer-friendly, they were multiplayer experiences played over the internet, connecting players like never before. Free-to-play games enticed more and more players to pick up their mouse, while the online component offered the thrill of competition. With the barrier to entry lower than ever, these games spread like wildfire throughout the world, further fueling the demand for esports competitions. In August of 2013, Riot Games sold out the Staples Center in Los Angeles in 1 hour.
I'm AFU Shock supporter coming to you live from the Staples Center here in Los Angeles, California.
The story made headlines in publications across the world. People were finally beginning to realize that the hidden world of esports was far bigger than they could have ever imagined. For a few years, mainstream media and esports continued to flirt, with the increasing size of esports events such as prize pools, attendance, and viewership all drawing media attention and confusion.
And I'm laughing because I can't think of anything less interesting, but I'm
Do you have any statistics of how many of those people also go to Star Trek conventions?
If you don't break a sweat, I don't consider it a sport.
Oh, no, you do. You do.
Then, in 2015, Jimmy Kimmel made his now infamous speech. Esports and gaming culture took center stage as our identity came under fire. The genie was out of the bottle, and there was no putting it back.
One of the top video game players is a guy named PewDiePie. He reportedly makes $4 million a year doing this, which is funny because that is precisely how much you would have to pay me to sit through one of those videos of somebody.
In record time, this video became Kimmel's most disliked video, and the backlash he received from the gaming community was of immense proportions.
This guy said, get cancer. Get brain cancer. That Jimmy Kimmel video is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Get AIDS.
But it wasn't just Jimmy Kimmel who would still have trouble wrapping his head around the concept of watching people play video games or esports. After TBS had announced their E-League TV deal, the often controversial Colin Cowherd chimed in with his own thoughts on the matter.
I am not a friend of esports. Okay?
Why are you so against? I just don't understand.
Well, it's the same with professional wrestling. It's for booger eaters.
What both Kimmel and Cowherd failed to recognize in 2015 was that esports was no longer just a subculture of the gaming community, but it was now a massive and, quite frankly, legitimate form of entertainment. A fact that Utah Jazz player Gordon Hayward would reiterate when he stepped in to defend the esports community.
You know, esports is probably the #1 growing competitive scene out right now, and more people are watching it every single day. And if it's something that you're interested in, I think you follow along. The commentators are unbelievable. The preparation that they have, the production that they have, it's really fascinating. I've been there. I've been to where they shoot everything, and you know, they sell out stadiums.
If Kimmel and Cowherd had bothered to look, they would have found that the viewership numbers for the 2015 League of Legends World Championships alone could tell a compelling story about exactly how big esports had grown to be around the world. That year, over 36 million unique viewers would tune in to watch a Faker-led SK Telecom T1 take home the trophy.
SKT will be your first ever two-time world champions!
An incredible feat which would beat out not only the 2015 NBA Finals, but the 2015 World Series and the 2015 NHL Finals as well. Now, with the mainstream media's full attention and the numbers to back up their success, the media's perception of esports and watching video games would rapidly change. So rapidly, in fact, that by the end of 2015, Fortune would write about the need-to-knows of investing in esports, followed up by a Forbes article about why esports is the next big thing. By the end of 2016, a plethora of notable organizations and sports stars like the Philadelphia 76ers, Sacramento Kings, FC Schalke, Rick Fox, Alex Rodriguez, Shaq, and Magic Johnson would all be invested in the space. 2017 continues to bring in the big names, with FC Copenhagen, the Miami Heat, and co-owner of the Milwaukee Bucks all getting involved early this year. But exactly how big is this growth expected to be? What will esports look like in 2020? Well, looking at esports revenue growth numbers provided by Newzoo, a market intelligence company specializing in the esports industry, it's projected that by 2020, the esports revenue is expected to reach almost $1.5 billion, almost double what it will be in 2017. That number pales in comparison to that of the NFL, MLB, or NBA, but none of those industries are expected to double their revenue in the next 3 years. With the majority of the esports audience between the ages of 18 to 34, and the projections that point towards continual growth in all aspects of the industry, the future only looks bright from here.
This has been a short biopic on the impact gaming has had on society and culture, especially in recent years, by using some of the more interesting and improving moments in its history so far.